We must face up to and understand and address the systemic racial discrimination that exists in our own communities. The Labour Party stands with black communities in our country and across the world because Black Lives Matter.
2 years ago, a promise from the leader of the opposition. But since then, a report on allegations of bullying, sexism and racism within the Labour Party found a perception that some forms of discrimination were taken more seriously than others. Today, the lead man commissioned by Sir Keir to write that report, Martin Forde KC, says more work still needs to be done.
There's been slow progress. I mean, in fairness to the party, there were some changes made at the party conference before the report landed. Like all reports, it's about implementation. So you can make recommendations, and if they're not implemented, then you know the report was pointless. So I'm keeping a kind of wary eye on what is and isn't done.
A working group has now been set up to look at implementation. His investigation received more than 1,100 submissions from members he says are desperate to see change.
One of the areas of the report is the problem of anti-black racism within the party. When you were doing this report, what kind of evidence led you to that conclusion?
I mean, I chose my words quite carefully. What I said was that there seemed to be a perception of a hierarchy of racism and a perception that the sort of Me Too complaints and complaints of anti-Semitism were prioritised, and that complaints in other areas, other types of racism, either took overly long or were difficult to make.
Some people hear you say sort of hierarchy of racism, they might think you're trying to diminish anti-Semitism, which they would say the party has had a specific problem with, put into special measures by the Equalities Watchdog for.
As I said, I've got every sympathy with the clearing up of the backlog, and obviously, as I said, self-selecting groups. Some of the complaints were historical. I suspect most were pre the Starmer era. What concerned me was that so many people had written in those terms, and it was really just to say to the party, you may have a difficulty here. It's something that you should be, it seemed to me, looking at, rather than possibly thinking we've dealt with the major source of complaints and the others can rather meander along.
Last month, Diane Abbott was suspended from Labour pending an investigation over a letter she wrote about how she perceives racism. That Irish, Jewish and traveller people undoubtedly experience prejudice, but they are not all their lives subject to racism. She later apologised, saying there is no excuse and I wish to apologise for any anguish caused.
I don't think I can be an apologist for what was said, and I think Diane herself has acknowledged that it was at best very clumsily worded. I could see for myself what she was trying to say, which was that if you are non-white, that is obvious, you know, visually obvious. And those of us who have that characteristic quite often experience a wholly irrational prejudice.
Doesn't she kind of exemplify the pitfalls of ranking racism in this way, or creating a hierarchy of racism?
I believe so, because I think it means that you can become fair game for those that you say aren't experiencing as much prejudice. If this is a standalone complaint, where an apology was given within hours, I think, if not minutes, I can see no reason why that couldn't be dealt with pretty promptly. I think given her service to the party and the appalling racism that she's suffered throughout her political career, I think it would be a terrible shame if this dragged on.
The Black MPs I've spoken to don't want to speak on camera. They worried that if they do, they fear they'll lose the whip. But privately, one said to me that when it comes to anti-black racism, the party is lacklustre at best. Another said when it comes to progress, that the party was just going through the motions. It felt performative. And another really worried what this would do to the relationship between the Labour Party and the black community. So angry and frustrated were some that Channel 4 News has seen a letter drafted to the Labour leader from few black MPs. In it, they say,
despite our party's claim to be anti-racist, we, our members and supporters, are losing faith in the ability and commitment of this leadership to tackle the issues raised in the Forde report, and we demand urgent action.
Labour has apologised for the culture and attitudes examined by the report. They say they're fully committed to tackling racist and discriminatory attitudes. They have implemented the bulk of the recommendations within the report, and the delivery of further ones are underway, and have now engaged with Martin Forde since the publication. Both parties indicated a desire to work together. For a party of equality and progressive politics that made specific promises to the black community, their members now waiting to see how and when those promises will start to bear fruit.